Welcome to the Healthy and Redeemed podcast, hosted by Healey. Healey is a licensed counselor with a passion for helping Christians live healthier lives, emotionally and spiritually. Each episode combines the truth of God's Word with practical advice to help you in your everyday life. Whether you want to grow emotionally, strengthen your faith, or handle life challenges with more peace, this podcast is for you. We're so glad you've joined us. Let's get started.
To God be the glory. Welcome back to the Healthy and Redeemed podcast. I am your host, Healey T with a bad attitude. No, I'm pretty sure I mentioned that way back when I wanted to be a radio host, and that was going to be my little call sign or whatever it's called. I don't know. But yeah, maybe I will start saying Healey T and just leave off the bad attitude part, because I don't think I have a bad attitude. But for those who haven't listened to the earlier podcast or the earlier episodes, honestly, I'm pretty sure I talked about it, but maybe that ended up deleted, because, sometimes I re-record these things, then I don't know what I've actually talked about. But when I was in college, I studied broadcast journalism. I know, you think I'd be a lot better at this. Okay, that was like 30 years ago or something, or more than 30 years ago. And yeah, so that's why I'm not a professional at this. But yeah, after I graduated college, I went active duty military. So I was going to do broadcast journalism in the military, but because I was in the reserves and I'd already had an MOS, I wasn't able to change over just because they needed me there. So anyway, and they didn't need people in broadcast journalism. And if you can imagine, my accent was a ton stronger than it is now. So even though even if they would have had room, they may not have taken me. Thought, girl, work on that accent. But I'm a lot better now, even though it's still there. You can hear it in my eyes. All right. Well, today we're going to talk about anxiety and the brain. Like, have you ever had your chest like just squeezed so tight and you think, and like it's hard to catch your breath, maybe you got a headache, like there's so much physical stuff going on that you think, oh my goodness, I better get to the emergency room right away. Yes, well, that typically is not a heart attack, even though it might feel like one. Most of the time, for most people, it's anxiety. And anxiety can feel so overwhelming, but did you know it actually starts in the brain? It feels very physical, but anxiety is actually triggered by specific brain processes that end up affecting our whole body. Understanding how God designed the brain can help us manage that anxiety better and actually improve our overall mental health. So basically, anxiety is part of the brain's built-in safety system. It was created to alert us to danger. So when it triggers correctly, like if we're walking through the woods and we hear like a large growl or a loud growl, we can be very thankful that parts of our brain can take over so we can actually get out of there, or we can, process what to do to survive. And that's what that alarm system is designed for. But sometimes that is triggered incorrectly, and it creates false alarms in us that lead to anxiety or excessive anxiety or panic attacks, or just feeling that overwhelmed, like we can't do anything. And normally those aren't in situations that are actually dangerous. We could be standing in Walmart and just feel overwhelmed by all the things that are noises and all the things that are going on, all the people. A lot of people have panic attacks in Walmart. So I normally teach my clients to Stay in Walmart until you've calmed yourself down, and then you can leave. But I find that that's one place that triggers a lot of anxiety. I don't know if Walmart knows that, but it really does. So if it's happened to you, I would encourage you to recognize, as we talk through today what's going on in the brain, recognizing my brain is triggering incorrectly. And one of the ways that we help it learn is to help it trigger correctly. And that's part of what we're going to talk about today. So we can appreciate that God has designed our brain with the ability to change and adapt. So he's actually made our brain in a way that it can change. It's called neuroplasticity, but who uses that word? Well, the big brain people. Healey does not. But basically it means that we can retrain our brain to work in healthier ways. And that's really good news, I think. So let's talk a little bit about some brain functions. So this is kind of technical, but I think you can actually think about what each part of our brain is doing, at least as you're listening to this, and think about, that's what's going on. But our frontal lobe is very important, and that part will actually shut down during a trigger. So if our brain triggers that there's danger, our frontal lobe will actually shut down, or at least function lower. So the frontal lobe, it includes things like forming memories, understanding and reacting to other people's emotions. It's the place that we also control our emotions. It's responsible for motivation and making decisions. So you can see that why it's so important to have our frontal lobe online when there is something like anxiety triggering the shutdown. Temporal lobe, those functions include hearing, understanding the sound. There is some memory processing there, but basically it's like interpretation, things like that go along with the hearing. Occipital lobe, that is responsible for vision and our ability to recognize objects. The parietal lobe, it processes sensory information like touch, temperature, and pain. It's also has some body awareness in there, and spatial orientation, things like that. We also have the cerebellum, and that controls our movement, our balance, our coordination. One of the important parts to really know and understand about is the limbic system. And that's where our emotions, memories, stress responses happen. So some of the key parts of the limbic system is the hippocampus, and that manages memory, connects emotions to experiences, storing emotionally charged memories that can trigger anxiety. The amygdala, that's actually the brain's alarm system, and that triggers emotional responses like fear, anger, stress. There is a term, I think, amygdala hijack, if you've heard of that. It's basically just takes over. And the amygdala does it quickly activates when you perceive danger. So the danger may be there, it may not be there, but what it does, it basically puts your body, makes it ready for action, and you go into fight or flight or freeze. So that's where that part happens. The hypothalamus, it regulates your hormones and activates the fight or flight response by signaling the release of cortisol, and that's the stress hormone. So you can see in the limbic system, like a lot of that stuff is happening all together, working all together. But it's important to know, like, not necessarily like you need to know every little thing going on, but recognizing that anxiety is happening, a lot of stuff is happening in the brain, and that we can actually help learn to manage that or teach our brain what to do. So if we're faced with stress, the amygdala sends a signal to the hypothalamus, activating the nervous system, and that triggers physical changes in us, like increased heart rate, rapid breathing, and a heightened senses. So while these responses are meant to keep us safe, they can also become very problematic if activated too often due to anxiety or past trauma. So, for example, if you've experienced a traumatic event, and most people can relate to this, but like, let's say you've been in a car accident, and your brain will link similar situations to that specific event. So let's say if you were in a car accident, you're driving through an intersection and you were T-boned, that can cause a lot of anxiety naturally the next time you drive through an intersection. And especially if it's the intersection that you were hit at, but it would be almost any intersection. And sometimes it could just be driving. Now, this will vary depending on personality type and, have you had trauma before and managed it well or learned to manage it well? But if people have a hard time managing it, they may have a hard time even getting in the car. But basically, what will happen is your brain will go, oh my gosh, you were hit the last time you were here. And so it will put you into that fight or flight or freeze place, right? Like, this is danger. I'm perceiving danger. But that may or may not be true. There may be no danger. And 99% of the time, there is not danger when you drive through an intersection. We do that all the time and don't get hit. Now, that's not to say, most of us have been hit in an intersection, but more times than not, we drive through safely. But our brain can trigger at that every time we get, for example, to the intersection. It says danger. And what happens next is very important. So what do? Do we stop driving so we avoid intersections? That would cause us to basically, what you're doing is reinforcing the brain to believe, yes, this is dangerous because my person is avoiding the situation. So obviously it's dangerous. The way that you teach the brain it's not dangerous is that you drive through the intersection. Now, you want to look both ways and you want to be cautious, but you continue to do that behavior. And as you do, like you might be anxious the first few times and may need to deep breathe to bring that heart rate down. But basically you're teaching your brain, hey, it's fine. It's okay. Like, we're going to get through this. We're going through this intersection just fine. And basically you're proving to your brain that it is actually a safe situation. So another example is maybe a specific smell might remind you of a stressful memory. So your body will react as if the event is happening again. So let's say, let me try to think of a specific situation. Okay, like maybe a smell of a cologne, like maybe you were abused by someone that wore a certain cologne. Maybe we would walk past someone and we would smell the cologne. Our brain would say dangerous situation, right? Just because the smell reminded us, put us back into the place of all the emotions and stuff that we felt when that person may have hurt us. So what we have to do is we remind our brain, we calm ourselves down and say, I am safe right now. And that will again teach the brain that it is not a time to trigger. It's not a correct time to trigger. So this is really important. As you can see, working through traumatic stuff is basically reprogramming the brain to trigger appropriately. Now, if you actually saw your abuser and that brought on anxiety, that may be appropriate, right? Because that was the person that hurt you. So that would be, I would say, a correct trigger of anxiety. And anxiety is saying, or the brain is saying, you need to do something. You need to get out of here. And which I would say would be a correct response. So then you wouldn't tell your brain, oh, it's okay. You would go ahead and get out of there. Unless they've been reformed or something like that. Okay. Another example is if someone says something that maybe someone in the past that hurt you also used to say. So maybe it's a phrase or a statement that someone used to say that was really mentally damaging, and someone in the current place said that. Okay, so in the past, someone said a phrase that was very degrading or hurtful to you. And so let's say you get married and your spouse says that phrase. In and of itself, the phrase isn't bad. But what happens is your brain triggers because it remembers that past event and says you're unsafe. And so this is oftentimes when our spouse or friend or someone will say something that's technically innocent. We can have this big reaction, either of defensiveness or anger or just some sort of emotional over respond. And they're like going, what is going on? And you may not even know what's going on. Your brain knows it's trying to protect you. But again, if it's a innocent phrase that in and of itself is okay, then that would be a situation where you have to, again, retrain your brain to say, I'm okay, it's safe. That's not what that means for everybody. It was just, my past. So our brain typically will trigger like we're in the old situation when actually we're not. And so that's what we have to teach our brain, what is true. Can you see from just those examples like why it's so important to retrain your brain? We have to be so intentional in addressing our triggers, which I'm not a big person of, I don't like these trendy words. But in this case, I do use it because that's exactly what's happening. The brain is triggering, alarming. It's setting off an alarm of danger, danger. And we have to be really intentional in addressing what is triggering us. If we have to not remove the triggers, because when we do that, it confirms to the brain that it was right. This was a dangerous situation. It has to be avoided. But to really work through our triggers, we have to allow them to trigger us. And then we teach our brain when it's a good time to trigger and when it's not. And so one of the best ways to do that is facing your fear. Now, we're in kind of a society that really teaches us, okay, trigger warning, and like we try to do things that don't trigger people. Well, it is good not to be mean, but it's really not good for the person who triggers if they're never triggered. They have to work through those things. Now, again, we don't go trying to trigger people and all that stuff. We can be sensitive to it, but at the same time, we can't walk around on eggshells with people because that's not helpful to people. We have to work through our stuff. So if we, like we talked about in the driving example, if we stop driving, we're teaching our brain that, oh, you triggered correctly, and now every time you get into the driver's seat, I'm going to trigger, because that's what the brain is saying. I'm going to trigger for you because every time you get into the car, it's an unsafe situation. And although it's good to be cautious, wear your seatbelt, do all that, be a defensive driver, we don't need to be in fight or flight mode when we get into the car. We have to teach our brain, it's okay. we need to be cautious, but we don't go on. So again, with a smell example, we're not going to avoid, smells, not that we can really control that much, but if our brain is associating any sort of memory with something bad, we can also teach our brain to associate it with something good. So let's say maybe we had a mom that yelled and scolded us harshly when we baked sugar cookies as a child. And so now when we smell sugar cookies, we're triggered. We might relive all the negative feelings of that condemnation, of that everything that person said every time we smell sugar cookies, like it brings back all this negative stuff. We don't live avoiding the smell of cookies our whole life. That's not helpful to us. Instead, we might, especially with smells, this is a good one, we can create new associations. So we might teach our children to bake the cookies and give them lots of praise. We might bake them ourselves and tell ourselves good and encouraging things. God has given our brains the ability to change, learn, and adapt, and we have to be intentional about doing that. And it sometimes is very heartbreaking when we don't even try to make those efforts. Instead, we just give in and say, okay, I don't want to ever do that or think about that or anything. That does not help us be healthy. One part of making sure that our brain is functioning the very best that it can is to take care of our brain. Now, I'm going to talk specifically about how to change our thinking in future episodes, but right now I just want to talk about taking care of the physical part of the brain, and that's called brain health. So if you want to learn a lot about brain health and some really helpful studies behind it, is to check out a guy named Dr. Daniel Amen. He's got lots of books, lots of resources, just lots of stuff. He has done extensive research and has some great information to share to help people transform, to change their brain without medication. So naturally, just by taking good care of our brain. And he's got a ton of books. One of the books that that actually introduced me to him was a book called Change Your Brain, Change Your Life. And so that's one of his earlier books. It was way back when. When I first started in practice. Just reading that book, I was sold on brain health as a way to help our mental and physical health. And since then, he's got a master's coaching program on brain health. I took that. I encourage you to check out some of his videos and books if you're interested in making your brain the healthiest it can be. Because if you do that, your mental health and your physical health will change for the better. God designed our brain to respond positively to intentional care. So let's talk really briefly about some ways to take care of our old brain, our noodle, as I used to say it with kids when I counseled them. You remember that old show about, they had a song about your noodle, talking about the brain. Anyway, it was kind of funny. In taking care of our brain, this list is in my book, my workbook called Changing Your Feelings. It's a workbook for anxiety and worry. If you've listened to any of my podcasts, you've probably heard a little commercial in it about it, but this has a whole list, and it has a lot of the information that I'm sharing today about brain health and ways that you can be intentional about changing it. And so honestly, just knowing a little bit can help you feel a lot more normal, right? So your brain's triggering at weird times and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm crazy. But really, it's just your brain trying to protect you. You just have to teach it how to do that correctly. It knows for the most part. God's given us a great alarm system that's so helpful for us, but it sometimes will kind of go overboard in protecting, just like a good mom, right? All right. So one way to have good brain health is make sure that you have appropriate levels of anxiety. So you're keeping your anxiety and your stress down and managing it well. So that's one thing that's always going to help us to be emotionally healthy, is to manage our emotions well. Another way to have good brain health is practicing self-control. And again, this is one thing I don't think society does enough of. I mean, we as a people, like, we basically have no self-control in a lot of areas. And I'm myself is included in that. I don't think we practice self-control enough. And if we really just want to practice a little bit, we can practice with fasting. And you can just try it a day to control or to remove food for a day and just have liquids as a way to practice self-control. Now, we're not trying to torture ourselves, but we are trying to, because well-disciplined people have good self-control. And self-control, I would argue, is a lot of managing your emotions. It's practicing patience. It's not giving in to every temptation that we have. So just because the donut is sitting there doesn't mean we have to eat it, even though we really want it. It's a good place to practice self-control. Another way to help your brain is to make sure that you're learning new things daily. Reading is a great way to do that. Playing little games, not excessively, but just, doing some strategy game or something like that. Studying something that you like to learn about, or studying something that you don't have any familiarity with. I mean, that's a great way. Just learning new things daily. Number 4, I'll give these numbers so I don't have to keep repeating the title over and over again. But number 4 of making your brain healthy is getting adequate exercise. And we've talked about this before, how important it is to have physical activity ingrained in your life. So, Dr. Amen has found through research that lifting weights is a really helpful way to improve your brain health. And he says that the stronger you are as you age, the less likely you are to get Alzheimer's disease. Now that's very interesting. And most of us don't want that disease, because we've seen people with it and it's hard to watch. It's hard to care for them. And but one of the things that we can do to help that is by lifting weights, just making sure that we're as strong as we can be. Number 6, walking using energy burst. So basically what you do is you walk or run as fast as you can, just for like a minute, and then you can stop and walk and do regular pace. If you've ever done the app, have you done the app? People don't talk about it much anymore, but it's Couch to 5K. I think that was the name of the app. I did that several times. They've got a lot of that to get people used to running, or, especially if you've only been on the couch and you want to do a 5K, it'll help you get there. And it uses a lot of those energy burst walking, and you're not doing it as fast as you can, but it will make you're walking, and then you run for a little bit and then you walk again. So I would encourage you to try out that app if you haven't, if it's still around. But Dr. Amen has found that if you just do it in bursts, just walking and running as fast as you can for a minute, that will again help the brain. Eating nutritious meals and snacks, of course, we all know that. Maintaining a healthy weight, of course, we all knew that. But it's not too low and it's not too high. So even low, you don't want it to be too low, because that's not healthy either. Now here's some good ones. Having healthy friends. Yes, we should look for people that we admire, that manage their emotions well, that they look and are acting emotionally healthy. Those are the people we should make our friends. If we've got a bunch of friends that are unhealthy, that are just reacting crazily every time something happens, those aren't really the best influences for us, because we tend to, well, I won't go into all that, but have healthy friends. Making sure that you're getting 7 to 9 hours sleep at night. We've talked again about sleep and the importance of it, because the brain cleans itself at night, and we need to be sleeping and going through each of the sleep cycles to get that cleansing going well. That helps the brain stay healthy. I have no idea what number we're on. Sorry. I tried that. Okay. I mean, I could go back and count, I guess, but practicing replacement thinking. And the next episode, I think, will be on this, transforming negative thoughts into healthy thoughts. So I'm not sure if that's going to be 1 or 2 episodes, because I love to talk about that. And I think it's a practice that will change your life. If you have any problem managing emotions or managing your thoughts or managing your behaviors, like, that's going to be the key, I think, personally. But anyway, so make sure you listen to the next episodes on that, because practicing replacement thinking, and that's not just, oh, I'm going to think positive. No, we want to think healthy. And I'm going to talk about what that is. So stay tuned. Praying or meditating is really, really good for the brain. It activates lots of good parts of the brain that we need for good brain health. Also, taking vitamin supplements, or making sure that you're eating vitamins rich in omega-3, vitamin D, B6, magnesium. Those things are really, really good for the brain. Making sure you're taking a multivitamin every day. And last but not least is drinking an appropriate amount of water. Yes. Okay, I figured out my water intake, because I'm always dehydrated most of the time. I just have the hardest time drinking water. And I'm not sure why. I like it. I like it at room temperature, but I have a really hard time drinking enough. And so basically, how you figure out how many ounces that you're supposed to drink, you take your body weight, and this is what made my water intake have to be really, really high. And I'm thinking, I'm not sure I can reach this, but you take your body weight. Okay, let's just take an easy number like 200, because I'm not that great at math. So we're going to take an easy number. So we're going to take our body weight, 200 pounds, and we're going to half that. So half of that is 100. And then we take 100, and that's how many ounces that we need to have to drink. That's my understanding. All right. So basically, we can break down those specifics into 5 categories. Mental habits, those are practicing self-control, learning new things, engaging in healthy thinking. Physical health, we're exercising on a regular basis, we're lifting weights, we're doing energy burst with walking or running, we're making sure we're getting enough sleep, we're eating nutritious foods, we're staying hydrated, and we're maintaining a healthy weight, what the doctor says is healthy, not what we think is healthy, what the guidelines say is healthy, okay? It's not too high, not too low. It's important to make sure we're getting enough omega-3, vitamin D, B6, magnesium. These vitamins boost brain functioning, and that's what we always want to be doing. Under spiritual practices, we can use prayer and meditation to calm the brain. It helps us shift from problems to the solutions, and it releases positive chemicals like oxytocin. That's really good for us. Also, our social support is another category. We're maintaining healthy and supportive relationships. A great way to do that is to get into a healthy church. Now, is everyone going to be 100% healthy? No. We all struggle with our stuff. So we have to give people a little bit of grace. No, not everybody's going to be healthy, but remember context, people. It's hard, I know. And also to integrate healthy routines. So we're managing our stress, we're managing anxiety. We do that through relaxation and, again, changing our thinking and the positive spiritual practices, again, like prayer, meditation, reading your Bible, going to church, things like that. So let me ask you, how well do you think your brain is functioning based on what we talked about, the alarm system of the brain? Is that functioning correctly? And then how are you doing in regards to the list that I shared? Like, what habits are you currently doing? And are there some that you're not doing? Or maybe you're doing some things that are hurting the brain. I didn't even go into those, but I'm sure you know what they are. What habits might you be able to integrate to actually help your brain function better? That's probably a really good place to start. What small change can I make to help my brain function the best that it can? Because it's going to be really hard to think and to behave in a healthy way if our brain is not functioning the best that it can. And that may just be from not getting enough sleep. Your brain isn't going to function the best that it can from something simple like that. So let's remember, our brain is wonderfully designed by God. And if we can intentionally care for our brain, spiritually, mentally, physically, we can experience peace and joy even when our situation is a mess or we're having lots of troubling emotions. Isn't that awesome? It's great. I love the way that God's created us. It's just so intentionally wonderful. Yes. I appreciate you so much joining me today. I would really love to hear from you. I mean, a comment about the podcast, if anything has been helpful so far. If you have a question for me or about anything mental health, I'll do my best to answer it. I would love to do that. Yeah, just send me a question and I'll answer it in a future episode. This is a fairly new podcast. I don't have any way to gauge if I'm actually being helpful. I don't have any way to gauge if I'm actually annoying. I have no idea. Hopefully I'm not annoying, but let me know your thoughts. If you do like the show, like, give me a rating or a review. That helps other people know that I'm here and I'm trying to help. Just a reminder today, your brain is a gift from God. It helps us in more ways than just keeping us alive, telling us to breathe. It's an organ that we can actually help function better by what we eat and by what we think and by all the things that we do. Now, let's go out and live healthy and redeemed, reflecting Jesus rightly in all that we do. And Lord willing, I'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening. The information provided is to be used as a resource. If you have a serious mental issue, we would encourage you to contact a therapist in your state.